So I've been invading with my Limgrave-only characters for a while now, and I've come up against a running trend of host and summon etiquette. I'll invade someone with my silly little guy and come at them guns blazing, but if they notice me first, there's a really high chance they'll try to get my attention by waving or bowing or some other form of passive engagement. I'm barreling toward them like a bat out of hell, ready to smash like the infraggable Crunk, and they straight up flag me down and try to be cordial. And it struck me that this is a weird phenomenon. It goes against everything the game encourages or incentivizes and displays the very human nature of player interaction. Our hostility is manufactured, our goals arbitrary. To quote that episode of The Simpsons where Homer fights Dredrick Tatum, why can't we be friends? At its core, this behavior in isolation doesn't strike me as something to be completely abolished, but it does leave me with a lot of less than entertaining invasions. When I invade someone, it's because they've made that possible. Whether knowingly or not, they're flagging themselves for PvP and all bets are off. This is what defines an invasion, an attack against the host party by an unknown assailant. Matchmaking requirements need to be met, but fairness is the last consideration. An invader might be way overpowered for the host team by way of equipment or skill. The host team might be dirty gankers looking to grief unsuspecting invaders. Invasions allow for both and everything in between, and that's what makes them what they are. So that people want to impose some etiquette into invasions feels counterintuitive, but also is reasonably appropriate when we consider the freeform nature of invasions. It's not crazy that someone wants to bow and have a fair fight where I take on each summon one by one, and then each blue one by one, and then finally the host. To them, it probably seems like the decent thing to do, and I honestly appreciate that they want a fun experience for everyone. That's a good way to play games and can help to reduce toxicity at its most harmful. But there's an unintended consequence from this behavior. You'll see it posted on forums or social media where people condemn invaders for not reciprocating this etiquette. The prevailing attitude becomes one of disparaging invaders for not having the common decency to bow or otherwise gesture before actually attacking. As you might suspect, this is bad for invasions. This is bad for invaders. The reception of invasions in Elden Ring is extremely negative. Players new to the series seem to by and large despise them, and my personal experience confirms as much. Hosts don't like so-called non-consensual PvP and see invaders as an imposition on both their time and fun. In all fairness, invaders are an obstruction. They change the game in a way you can't control, and a lot of players don't like that. It's what makes invasions so interesting, but I understand their frustration. And I'd venture to say that a lot of this negativity surrounding invasions as some violating game mode with no place in decent gaming society is a result of an expectation of etiquette on the part of the invaded. If you've been with the series for a while, you'll no doubt remember fight clubs becoming a thing in Dark Souls 2 and really taking off in Dark Souls 3, along with the community's warm reception. People loved fight clubs because they cherished the opportunity to make fights more social. Spectating matches had a Roman-esque vibe of judgment that made the fighters feel like gladiators. Basically, fight clubs were their own arenas. In a game like Dark Souls 3, where the actual arena doesn't allow 4 spectators, has incredibly short match times, and has no way to facilitate the rotating matches, fight clubs make a lot of sense. Even in Elden Ring, they still have their place. The problem I've always had with fight clubs is that they kind of ruin invasions. I don't want to get into a series of duels when I'm invading. There's a dueling sign that allows for exactly that sort of matchmaking, but it takes longer, so people just use invaders and blues. Instead of trying to stop a host who is progressing through a level as Miyazaki intended, fight clubs pull invaders away for someone else's amusement. Instead of a blue being called to help someone who might actually need it, they're getting co-opted into a fight club queue. These things can disrupt the multiplayer economy, sometimes for the better, but often for the worse. But fight clubs are fine. They're held in isolation, and they're actually pretty scarce in Elden Ring because of the lower player count. What's more problematic is the expectation. Hosts should not expect that level of cooperation from an invader, and should embrace that the benefit of an invader is best served when they confront you in the midst of a level. I've seen it time and again where hosts complain about how cowardly invaders are for hiding among the enemies in a level and striking opportunistically when those hosts are at their most vulnerable. Of course, this is exactly how invasions have been designed, and everything is working as intended. Everything except the host's attitude, that is. I want to make a hot take here and say that hosts who don't like being invaded actually don't like Souls games quite as much as they think. It's not weird to not enjoy every part of a game. I certainly don't like a ton of things about Elden Ring, but invasions are an integral part of every mainline Souls game and shouldn't be viewed in isolation. So the push for invaders to conform to host expectations to make invasions more palatable is what I see as a major source of this attitude. The etiquette is one of total conformity and consent, making sure all parties are attentive and ready for a fight. Really, it's just dueling etiquette grafted onto invasions in the dumbest way possible. Hosts will try to engage with invaders and chug all of their heals to ensure a fair and honorable fight with no gimmicks like recovery in play. It's a nice gesture considering the host has twice the healing capacity of an invader, but it's not what an invasion is for. It's just a more considerate version of so-called bonfire or grace duelists, those hosts who are dueling invaders but leveraging every advantage they have as a host and calling it honor. Like I said earlier, there is a dueling sign for exactly this type of encounter, where people can be summoned for a consensual fight. Exploiting invaders for duels is bad for the game's multiplayer experience. It's no better than ganking, even if it's slightly less annoying, and it's something I'd love to see done away with. I hate when a host stands off to the sidelines so I can fight their overleveled phantoms, and then submits to me the second I win. It tells me they have no real interest in participating in the experience, and aren't getting anything out of the most interesting part of the game. Of course they'll go through life believing an invader means game over, or that fighting is something you do on a level playing field, instead of embracing that Souls games aren't fair and are better for it. There's no right way to win a fight, only a winner and loser. Whoever is most prepared is probably going to win, and there's nothing wrong with that. Having a code for what you believe is important in a fight is great, but imposing that code on others is ridiculous. We're watching the multiplayer community for the only prominent game series in existence that has invasions devalue the very essence of the mode. Suddenly, if I don't play nice, I'm somehow violating the unspoken code of conduct by which all good players must abide. I look at how excited people are that Night Rain won't feature invasions or PvP, and I psychically vomit. I am disgusted by how ready players are to throw away a most sacred tradition, especially when they've never truly grasped the concept, and try as I might, I am not sure how to reach them. With my Limgrave-only characters, I'm going out of my way to accommodate hosts. I love low-level invasions because I like sword fights with limited magic. It's a tonal choice that works well for how I enjoy the game. By not giving myself the slew of very strong options I could have on a traditional twink, I'm giving hosts at every level a fighting chance at victory, which I find infinitely more entertaining than imposing etiquette. And I suffer for it when I fight overleveled phantoms or hosts who are leveraging those advantages. But even then, even at its worst, I still prefer a standard invasion to an improvised duel. I want to heckle my opponents as they progress. My measure of success is how well I can separate them and make them make mistakes. If they stop confronting enemies and volunteer to fight one-on-one, I haven't accomplished anything. Obviously I can kick your ass, bro. I wouldn't have come inside if I didn't think it was my house. The idea was that you have friends over and might get outside or call the cops. I'm doing this for the risk. When those players don't engage in every part of the invasion, it doesn't help me grow my skills or teach them anything valuable about battle management. It reduces invasions to this fractional instance of pseudo-PvP that functions exactly like every other planned encounter. Invasions are supposed to be the one thing that changes how you play, both as a host and as an invader. It's PvP at its most raw, and I think that's how we should determine etiquette. Invaders should be hiding behind a corner, waiting to push you over the ledge because you were too busy running past all the enemies to notice. They should be waiting next to the hardest enemies to jump you when you're at your weakest, because that's what makes the encounter more challenging. Invaders are not duelists, and expecting them to behave as such is an insult to their craft. If players don't learn to embrace invaders for the righteous shits they are, then they'll never become invaders themselves. The game mode will fall further and further out of relevance because no one likes it. Of course, players who don't invade don't like it. They've never tried it and they're interacting with it from a completely skewed angle. They'll go in thinking someone bows before they throw a punch, and when that doesn't happen, they'll insist it's the invaders who are wrong. And don't get me wrong. I like the weirdness of invasions in all forms. I like that people gesture at each other and sometimes are helpful and drop items. I like that it's not always about getting the easiest kill or behaving as menacingly as possible. Nuance is the soul of interaction, and I wouldn't trade it for anything. It is solely the burden of expectation placed on invaders to behave appropriately that destroys that nuance and demands a template. So I say don't bow unless you want to. Gesture only when you feel it right. Don't be afraid to disrupt the host. Heal when you need to heal and take every shot you can afford. Fight like your way of life depends on it, because in every way imaginable, it does. This may not be Dark Souls, but it's a torch worth bearing. Let me know how you feel about dueling etiquette in invasions in the comments. Do you like when everyone is nice and boring and never takes any risks? Or are you cool and dangerous, like the bad red men of old? Like the video if you liked it and subscribe for more. Until next time, thank you for watching.